पतित पावन तोमार बिना के होना पतित पावन तुम बिने के होना যাহার নিকটে গেলে পাপ দূরে যায় যাহারা নিকটে গেলে পাপ দূরে যায় এমন দয়ালা প্রভু কেহ কোথা গঙ্গার পরশ হইলে পশ্চাতে পাবন গঙ্গার পরশ হইলে পাশ্চাতে পাবন দর্শনে পবিত্র করো এই তোমার গুণ দর্শন পবিত্র করো এই তোমার গুণ হরি স্থানে অপরাধে তরে হরি নাম হরি স্থানে অপরাধে তারে হরি নাম তোমার স্থানে অপরাধে নাহি পরিত্রাণ तोमास्थाने अपराधे नहि परित्राण। तोमार हृदये सदा गोविंद विश्राम। तोमार हृदये सदा गोविंद विश्राम। गोविंद कहेन मोर वैष्णव परान। गोविंद कहेन मोर वैष्णव परान। प्रति जन्मे करी आशा चरणेर धूली। प्रति जन्मे करी आशा चरणेर धूली। नरोत्तम कर दया अपनार बोली। नरोत्तम कर दया अपनार बोली। बार करुणा करो वैष्णव गोसाई। पतित पावन तुम दीन के होनाय। जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद। जय जय भक्तिसिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर भक्तिसिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 प्रभुपाद। प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। जयम विष्णुपद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद श्रील अभय चरणारिन भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री श्रीमद भक्तिसिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नाम आचार्य श्रील ठाकुर हरिदास की जय। Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham ki jai. Ganga Devi ki jai. Yamunamai ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Tulsi Rani ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Harinama Sankirtana ki jai. Grantharaj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. ISKCON DBT Samsthapak Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai. Srila Bhaktisidhanta Sarasvati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. O Vaishnava Goswami, please be merciful to me now. There's no one except you who can purify the fallen souls. Where does anyone find such a merciful personality by whose mere audience all sins go far away? After bathing in the waters of the sacred Ganges many times, one becomes purified. But just by the sight of you, the fallen souls are purified. This is your great power. The holy name delivers one who has committed an offense to Lord Hari. But if one commits an offense to you, there is no means of deliverance. Your heart is always the resting place of Lord Govinda. And Lord Govinda says, the Vaishnavas are my heart. I desire the dust of your holy feet in every birth I may take. Please consider Narottam yours and be kind upon him. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Today is the most auspicious occasion of the divine appearance of His Divine Grace Nitya Lila Pravishta Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that great Acharya who has spread Krishna consciousness in so many different places and in so many different ways, and who inspired the person by whose divine grace we're all sitting here today, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Who can imagine such an exalted soul? What is his position? So today he appeared in 6th of February, 1874. In where? Jagannath Puri, holy place. And when he was 5 months old, he was taken unto Lord Jagannath's Rath. 5 months old, he was taken unto Lord Jagannath's Rath, and there he received the Lord's garland. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's wife, she's the wife of the magistrate, so she can take her infant and place him on the cart in front of Jagannath. And Lord Jagannath reciprocated immediately. As if embracing the child, he dropped his garland and it encircled the boy. A hint of things to come. When he was just 10 months old, they took him to Ranakat, Bengal, and that's where he spent his infancy and his early childhood. Once he decided to take mango, and without even thinking to offer it, he just ate. Sometimes we don't know, is it bhoga or is it prasadam? So that's what he did, and his father chastised him. This is bhoga for the deity, and you've taken the bhoga for the deity. This is a great offense. He was only, how old was he then? He was maybe, it could not have been even 10 years old, I think. Maybe 10 years old. But from that point on, for the rest of his life, he never took mango again. If asked for mango, he said, no, if you take a Muslim's beard and dip it in honey and suck on that, that's what a mango is like. He had that. He was so detestful of the principle of violating this devotional service, this principle that only Hari should be the primary enjoyer. The only enjoyer, actually. In 1881, he was initiated by his father. We have two kinds of disciplic succession. mentioned in Srila Prabhupada's books. One of them is Shukra Sampradaya, and the other one is Shishya Sampradaya. So you can be initiated by bona fide guru in Guru Shishya Parampara, or you can be initiated by your father also in the Shukra Parampara. So that's what he did in 1881. He was initiated into the worship of Kurma Shalagram and a recitation of Narsingha Mantra, as well as chanting the Mahamantra on his beads. In other words, this is Harinama Diksha. Srila Prabhupada considered Harinam to be Diksha. Other people now doubt this, but there's no doubt about it, at least in Prabhupada's mind. So this was his formal entry into Vaishnavism. In his teens, he was awarded the title Sri Siddhanta Saraswati because he was so expert in astrology. And in fact, he was translating books on Jyotish as well as, astronomy, but Jyotish as well, astrology. And he was writing articles on these such topics. He formed a club in his teenage years called Chira Kumar Sabha. What does that mean? Chira Kumar Sabha. Always remaining like a brahmachari, yes. The girls, when they're virgins, they're called Kumari. The boys, when they're brahmacharis, are called Kumar. So this was his taste. He entered college, Sanskrit college in Kolkata, 1892, but he wasn't very satisfied with the mundane environment of that college. He left in 1895, but his learning was recognized widely, so much so that the successive kings of the royal house in Tripura were employing him as a pundit, court pundit, for many years, actually. At least 10 years he was doing that. He established Saraswati Chatushpati, an academy of astronomy, and began to observe Chaturmasya very strictly each year. That was in 1897. In 1899, he published and edited articles in a magazine called Nivedan. In 1900, he was initiated by Srila Gaura Das Babaji on his father's instruction. So he had both initiations. And his father instructed him to take shelter of Gaura Das Babaji because although he wasn't strictly in the Diksha line, but he was respected for his advancement, spiritual advancement, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was instructed by Bhaktivedanta Thakur, take shelter of this Vaishnava, he's a Siddha Purusha. And so he did that. Several times, actually, he asked Gaura Das Babaji to give him initiation, but Gaura Das Babaji declined. And each time he would ask, Gaura Das Babaji would say, I will consult with Mahaprabhu and see if I can do this. And then he came back again and he said, did you consult with Mahaprabhu? And what was his answer? And Gaura Das Babaji would say, oh, I forgot. So he wasn't inclined to initiate. That was his humility. But because he had the order of his father, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was absolutely determined. And he was so determined that once he met Gaura Das Babaji and he told him, if you don't initiate me, then I'm going to give up my life. Have we heard this before? Who do we hear this from? In one song I'm thinking of, you've heard. Bhaktivedanta Thakur wrote this song. He got this from his father. What does he say? Karuna na haile kandiya kandiya prana na rakhibo ar amar prana na rakhibo ar. I'll not be able to maintain my life if you don't show me your mercy. So he had this attitude, and Gaura Das Babaji finally accepted him as his duly initiated disciple. In that same year, 1900, he started to publish Bange Samaji Katha, another publication of his. In 1901, he accompanied Bhaktivedanta Thakur to Puri, his birthplace, and there he spent much time over the next few years engaging in deep study and bhajan. And in 1905, he went to South India. He visited many holy places. He met with many scholars and religious personalities, and he conducted research. He had a very fruitful time in South India. In fact, his father's order and his own desire as well was to somehow or other reestablish the decayed varnashram system that was extant at that time in Bengal. People were not following very strictly, just like sometimes we don't follow very strictly, even though our spiritual master has informed us that it's the remaining 50% of his mission. So he was very keen on doing research about this, and from the Sri Sampradaya, he studied in particular, how do they take sannyas? Why did he want to emphasize varnashram? Because he saw so many so-called Babajis in Paramahamsa Vesh, but they were debauchees actually. They were not advanced at all. Just, for name and fame, they were assuming this dress of someone who's even beyond sannyas, avadhutas. He didn't appreciate that very much. And in fact, neither did the people in general, because by this time, in West Bengal at least, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism was seen as a beggar's excuse to exploit people. And even the caste Goswamis, I'm sorry to say, were actually doing the same thing. Although in their own character they were not so pure, and not even following the regulative principles that we all vow to follow at our initiation. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati thought, and his father actually was the source of this, that Bhaktivedanta Thakur thought they would have to figure out how to put a stop to this. And as usual, what does Krishna say at the end of chapter 16 in Bhagavad-gita about what you should do and what you should not do? How do you know what to do and what not to do? Who knows? George say boliye. Yeah, the Pura Shloka. Ye shastra vidhim utsrijya vartate kamakarataha nasasiddhim avapnoti nasukham naparamgatim. So you'll not even be happy, what to speak of getting any kind of perfection, and certainly not the supreme perfection, if you do not follow the Shastric injunctions. Therefore, we also see our own Srila Prabhupada, in the last 3 years that he was with us, he gave roughly 80% of his instructions on this topic of varnashram. And at the same time, he was very seriously emphasizing the need for Vaidhi Bhakti. Where does ISKCON get this mood from? If you try to talk very freely about Raganuga Bhakti in ISKCON, you may find some resistance. There's a reason for that. It comes from our acaryas. Not that Raganuga Bhakti is off limits. It is there. And we have to advance to that platform. But swaya swayadhikare ya nishtha saguna parikirtitaha. To follow what you're actually qualified to do, that is a guna, qualification. And to attempt anything other than that, especially anything opposed to that, that is dosha, flaw. So they were preaching like this. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did this research in South India, and he instituted this later on in the Gaudiya Math. He's not yet founded Gaudiya Math, but he had these ideas in his mind, just as Srila Prabhupada had all these ideas in his mind for many years before he actually had the opportunity to implement them. So this is how pure devotees work. Govinda Dasi, my god sister in Hawaii, used to be in Hawaii. She's now I think in the US, but she told me that Srila Prabhupada used to take walks sometimes I think in Los Angeles and other places. This is way back in the early days, like 68, 69. We hardly had anything at that time. And he would see a house, and he would just be looking at this house, and then he would say, see that room there? That will be the prasadam hall. Here's where the deities will go here. This is where the Sankirtan books will be stored. Srila Prabhupada, everything he did, everything he saw was calculating like this, how to preach Krishna consciousness. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was also like that. And he took a vow, Shatakoti Nama Yajna, that he was going to chant the holy name at least 3 lakhs every day. 3 lakhs every day. Now if you go to Ayodhya, Ram Lala has recently been installed there. Anybody been there? Raise your hand if you've gone. Okay. Some determined ones. They had to consult the Tirupati, Tirumala Devasthanams in Tirupati just to understand how to control these crowds, because they're getting 2 lakhs of people every day there. You think we got a problem here? Yes. So 3 lakhs of names, even more than that. He was chanting every single day. And he did this for many, many years also. So until he completed 1 billion names, then he was satisfied. He started initiating disciples in 1906. In September of 1911, he addressed a very famous gathering on behalf of his father, who had become ill. His father was due to speak there, but he was ill at the time, and so he deputed his son to go there and speak on his behalf. The difference between a Brahmin and a Vaishnava, it's a very famous event, and it's been published actually in a book called Brahmana O Vaishnava, Bengali, and it's probably been translated into English as well. So that was in 1911, and that established his reputation as a very formidable scholar and a Vaishnava of integrity in Bengali society. So, same year, he again successfully addressed a public meeting, this time on the godhood of Lord Chaitanya and the eternality of the Gaudiya mantras that we all chant, those who are twice initiated. Sometimes people think that, they just make up these Gayatri mantras, but it's not so. In March of 1912, he fasted for 4 days at Kashim Bajar, Sammilani. He was invited there, and he didn't like the association so much. So he wouldn't take any food there. Sometimes we go to a place, actually Prabhupada gave us this instruction, when you go to a place where the people are not following the principles, or they're non-devotees, you have to be very careful not to ingest what they've cooked, because whatever a sinful person is cooking, that pop is transferred into the cooking, and then you get that. So we have to be very careful. There are many stories about that. But with other devotees in the same year, he toured throughout West Bengal, all the places visited by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. The next year, he rented a large house in Kolkata, and he established a press as well in that place, and he composed his Anupashya commentary on Chaitanya Charitamrita, very famous. Much of Srila Prabhupada's own commentary on Chaitanya Charitamrita is based on this one, as well as that of his father, Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So he moved the press in Mayapur after a few years, and he inaugurated Bhaktivedanta Thakur's Pushpa Samadhi at Godrumadweep. Many of us have been there. He relocated his press also to Krishnanagar, and in 1915 he revived Bhaktivedanta Thakur's Sajjana Toshini magazine. That was published for many years, and the same thing was later on published in English as The Harmonist. He was involved in the first major public meeting in honor of Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur at Bangaya Sahitya Parishad in Kolkata. That's a literary society. And Bhaktivedanta Thakur was very highly respected, even in his lifetime. But to preserve that memory, he started these kinds of events. And in fact, the early nascent Gaudiya Mat that was started by Bhaktisidhanta Sarasvati, before he named it Gaudiya Mat, they were called Bhaktivinod Asan, the seat of Bhaktivinod, all of his preaching centers. So he had high regard for his father. If not for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we would not have all these bhajans that we sing from Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Just think about the invaluable contribution that he's given us. How deep and profound, although it's simple Bengali language, but those songs are so, so deep. More than anything else that I've read in other languages. I've read Braj Bhasha bhajans, I've read Sanskrit bhajans, and every language has their own ocean of bhajans. But I've not seen anything like this body of literature that is produced by our Goswamis, and especially our recent acharyas, such as Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Prabhupada also instructed us to chant these bhajans. Narottam Das Thakur, especially Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Lochan Das Thakur, Govinda Das Kaviraj, etc. Okay, so he was doing this. His own spiritual master, Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji, disappeared in November of 1915. 3 years later, he took sannyas, and he took the name Srila Bhaktisidhanta Sarasvati Thakur, or Maharaj. He established the Chaitanya Mat and the worship of Sri Sri Guru Gauranga and Gandharva Giridhari. They're in Mayapur at the Yogapeeth. We all know that place. In 1918, this is during World War I, he established Bhaktivedanta Asana. He made another preaching tour and went to Puri and established another Bhaktivedanta Asana there, as well as at Mayurbhanj. At the end of that year, he established one at Ultadanga Junction in Kolkata. That place is now renovated by ISKCON, isn't it? So, great service they've done. He also reintroduced Vaishnava Shraddha. When our parents die, the general practice is to perform Shraddha so that they are relieved from any sinful activity or any untoward reactions that may obstruct them from taking another birth or moving up in the cycle of evolution of consciousness represented by another species, preferably human. So that's an important thing that everybody does that, but Vaishnavas in North India in general, West Bengal also, they tended to think that we're more advanced than that because we're Vaishnavas, even though, as we mentioned already, many of them were not even Vaishnavas, real Vaishnavas that is. So we have to be careful of that mentality. He took the pain to reintroduce that samskar. Also in the same year, he took a tour of Jeshore and Khulna, West Bengal, East Bengal. He established the Vishwa Vaishnava Raja Sabha, and he held the first Gaur Purnima festival in the Chaitanya Mat, and he inaugurated Bhakti Shastri examinations. This is not just coming from Srila Prabhupada, but he had the same thing in Gaudiya Mat. I would think they were probably a little stricter in Gaudiya Mat than ours. In this book by Bhaktivedanta Swami Bhaktisidhanta Vaibhava, he's actually detailed a lot of these things. You can read about them. It's very interesting. Just how he organized the Gaudiya Mat and how he was preaching Krishna consciousness in those days. So, Ram Jivanpur, he established another Bhaktivedanta Asana. He also oversaw the annual Tirobhav Mahotsav for his father, Bhaktivedanta Thakur. That was held at Swananda Sukhada Kunj, and he installed a deity there of him. Swananda Sukhada Kunj is the same place where Bhaktivedanta Thakur had his bhajan kuti in Godram, Sarupganj. Samadhi, yes. And in 1919, he took a preaching tour of East Bengal immediately after a devastating cyclone. So the people were probably ready to hear something. And he reintroduced Navadip Dham Parikrama the following year. He also established deities at Kolkata, and he renamed it in that year, 1920, as Sri Gaudiya Mat. Around that time, he worked extensively on Vaishnava Manjusha, entered an extended period of concentration on writing, resulting in several major publications in the 1920s. That was the heyday of the Gaudiya Mat, the 1920s and early 30s. So he initiated his first sannyasi disciple, Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj, and he published Acharo Acarya, which was a very radical book that caused shock to so-called Vaishnavas conducting business in the name of religion. This was one of his major characteristics. He was really, really strongly opposed, very forcefully, antagonistic actually, towards any kind of hypocrisy in the name of religion that he saw. This is maybe his primary hallmark. For that reason, he was called Singha Guru, Lion Guru. Sometimes if he saw an impersonalist, or especially a Mayavadi, he would just go up to him and start physically shaking him by the collar and saying, "Why are you trying to erase Krishna? What's wrong with you?" So, these are some of his activities. He met our own Srila Prabhupada, Abhay Charan Day, in Kolkata in which year?
23.
No, 1922. It depends. You know, Indian calendars, you have either 1 year or the year after it. It's hard to tell. So he launched Gaudiya magazine, Gaudiya, and he lectured for 1 month on the first verse of Srimad-Bhagavatam, every day for 31 days. It's possible, actually. That's probably one of the longest commentaries of all the acharyas in the whole Bhagavatam. Very, very extensive commentary. We can see it reflected in Prabhupada's own purport. First verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was in Dhaka. There's still a Gaudiya Math in Dhaka. Very clean, very impressive. They've maintained his rooms very nicely there, which is a recent development. In the 1970s, it was almost dead, but it's been very nicely taken care of, which just goes to show, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata bhyuttanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijami, Krishna says. I will somehow or other rectify things, even if they go awry. So we should have no fear of that. So he set up Gaudiya printing works in Kolkata, and their serial publication of Srimad Bhagavatam was begun in 1923. In 24, he was honored at the first annual Vyas Puja, and he accepted the title of Prabhupada because he really did do so much preaching all over India. Not only India, he sent preachers where?
London.
To London and Germany and Burma. Yes, international. So this was the parent organization of ISKCON. He touted Gauda Mandala and with about 100 devotees. Sorry, he toured Gauda Mandala with about 100 devotees, and then led the 5th annual Navadip Dham Parikrama. At that year, this is 1925, also the party was attacked. Why were they attacked? We mentioned already, because he was so forceful and so antagonistic towards cheaters. Srila Prabhupada was relatively soft compared to his Guru Maharaj. But even on one occasion, I remember that Prabhupada was speaking to some professors, respectable men. And Prabhupada asked him, I think this was in Los Angeles. Any LA wallets here? I don't know. I think it was, do you remember this? In the garden, yes. So he saw many respected scholars, leaders in that field, and he was asking them, what is God? And nobody wanted to answer, maybe because they were afraid to answer. Sometimes, it's like when we used to go to Bhaktivedanta Swami's lectures, you wanted to sit way in the back. So anyway, they didn't say anything, and Prabhupada zeroed in on one of them, and he said, what is it? You're a theologian, you should know. What is God? Who is God? And he said, I'm afraid we can't say that. And Prabhupada turned to Sarup Damodar, his scientist disciple, and he told him, what do you call this? If he's teaching something that he doesn't know, what do you call that? And Sarup Damodar was right on it, without missing a beat. What did he say? Cheater, Srila Prabhupada. Cheater. And Prabhupada said, yes, cheater. Two things. There's a cheater, there's a teacher, and there's a cheater. They're very similar. You just have to, switch a few consonants. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur was very, very radical in this way, and they actually tried to assassinate him. So what happened? I think it was Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, right? Because he had some resemblance to his guru. So they put him in the sannyas dress, and he was taking the place on the card as if he were Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he was ready to die for his spiritual master. Are you? Duryodhana said in the beginning of Bhagavad-gita about his men, what did he say about them? Ye sarve tyakta jivitaha. They've all given up their lives for me already. He knew they were going to die, it seems. Or, they had given their lives in the sense that they were so devoted that they were ready to die for him. These are demons. Not demons, but they were on the wrong side. So we have to think about this. What are the ramifications for us? He established in 1926 Sanatan Gaudiya Math at Banaras. Why Sanatan Gaudiya Math? Because Sanatan Shiksha happened there. Similarly at Prayag, who was it? Rupa Gaudiya Math. And that was in 26. He launched Nadiya Prakash, regular daily. Somebody asked him, how can you publish a newspaper about God every day? People who are materially inclined, materially absorbed, they can't imagine. How do you say so many things? Sometimes when we're new to Krishna consciousness, if they suggest that maybe you should give the class, we you see? But actually, if we're taking it in deeply, then we should have so much to say. People will not be able to shut us up. Satatam kirtayanto mam, Krishna says. So, he inaugurated a new temple at Chaitanya Mat, and he installed large deities there, and he embarked on an extensive tour of India. He resumed publication of Sajjanatoshini. It was already going on, but in Sanskrit and in Hindi also. So in many languages, and in English also. So at least 4 languages he was publishing. Paravidyapith was established at Mayapur in 1927. The same year, he went on an extensive tour of North India. He went to Mount Abu, he went to Kurukshetra, various places in the north. Nadiya Prakash also came at Delhi in the next year, February 28. November 28, in Kurukshetra, he inaugurated the Pradarshini Theistic Exhibition, and Gaudiya Math branch there in Kurukshetra. He met with Professor Albert Southers of Ohio State University in 1929. In the following year, he installed deities at Prayag and preached to thousands of people at the Kumbh Mela. You can imagine what that must have been like for people to hear Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at the Kumbh Mela. In 30 and 31, he toured South India and he established 5 Padapitas of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I used to live in Cuttack, Orissa, and there on the bank of the Mahanadi, just outside of one old Chandi temple, there is a small shrine, and inside that shrine is the footprints of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which were installed by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He did likewise in various other places. He intended to establish over 100 of them throughout India, but he never finished that work. I think it's for us to finish that work. So, anyway, he began publication of the Bhagavatam in 1931, which was a Hindi fortnightly. At the end of that year, he held another successful diorama exhibition in Kolkata. He began the Thakur Bhaktivedanta Institute in Mayapur, that school which is still, the building is there at least, still now. And he was received very nicely in Chennai, Madras in those days, in January of 1932. In Assamese, he began to publish a monthly called Kirtan. And in Oriya, he began to publish a similar regular publication called Paramarthi. And he completed the publication of Chaitanya Bhagavat with his own commentary. That's very widely read even now in English. It's been translated. That was in 1932. He began a series of examinations in 10 subject areas for the titles Bhakti Shastri and Acarya. It was an expansion of what he had already begun in 1918. He toured South India again and was received as a state guest by the Maharajas of Mysore and Maharaj of Trivandrum, and had extensive discussions with those personalities who were very spiritually inclined. In 1932, he led the Vrajamandala Parikrama. He held another major diorama exhibition in Dhaka. He dispatched his 3 disciples to London, 3 of his sannyasi disciples. He initiated a second diorama exhibition at Kurukshetra in 33. At the end of that year, he toured Navadip Mandala as well. And they found a deity of Adhokshaja Vishnu in the Yogapeeth and identified that deity as the former household deity of Jagannath Mishra. In 1934, he discovered the place where Rupa Goswami had received darshan of the Gopal deity. In 1935, he met with Sir John Anderson, governor of Bengal at that time, who visited Mayapur. And in the same year, he published Saraswati Jayashri, a collection of his own essays. And Grand New Temple at Yogapeeth was overseen by the Maharaj of Tripur, who was very fond of Gaudiya Mata and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He sent preachers to Burma in 1935. And he had the first radio broadcast of Harikatha from the Indian Broadcasting Service Center in Kolkata. In September of that year, he published the final volume of an annotated full-length edition of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Ki Jai. In 1935, he received Ban Maharaj from his return from Europe, accompanied by 2 Germans. His health began to fail the following year, in 1936. He continued to travel and preach widely and opened several centers that year. He sent Bhaktisarang Goswami, who was born in the family line of Nityananda but took initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He sent him in the place of Bon Maharaj to London. And on the first day of 1937, he left this world. Actually, it's described that he was not, Prabhupada said, that he was not entirely satisfied with his disciples, because by that time in the Gaudiya Mata, they had received such success through preaching. Whenever you're preaching purely, you're going to get assets. And what happens when an institution collects assets? Then people join who are looking for the assets rather than the essence. And it would seem that, some members of the Gaudiya Mata became distracted by that. And other problems were there as well. Even some of his own disciples betrayed him, trusted disciples. And so he was not so happy. He was a little bit discouraged. And Prabhupada said he actually left this world earlier than, is usual, and earlier than he should have. Anyway, that's an unfortunate history of the Gaudiya Mata, and things fell apart because largely they neglected the order of the spiritual master, which was to found a GBC and to work cooperatively. They didn't want to cooperate, and they founded a GBC eventually, but it was after he was already gone, and it didn't really do much because everybody had left and gone their own way anyways. So it wasn't effective. So we have to always be careful of that. If the spiritual master gives an instruction, we have to take it very seriously. We should not think that it's not meant for us. We should not think that we're more advanced than that. We should not have personal ambitions, because Prabhupada said that would ruin everything. And he said we have nothing to fear from the outside, but what we have to fear is all going to come from amongst ourselves. And we do see these problems from time to time, even in ISKCON. So we have to be very mindful of this and do not repeat history. That's why we talk about this history. In many places it's been discussed throughout Srila Prabhupada's books. One of my godbrothers went to Vishakhapatnam. Prabhupada had a very favorable godbrother there. This was back in the 1970s when ISKCON had no presence in Vishakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh. And so he stayed in the Gaudiya Mata there, and he asked this acarya of that Mata. This was long after Gaudiya Mata had broken up. This is in the 1970s. That what happened? Tell me, what was the story of the Gaudiya Mata? Because there are different histories, depending on who you ask. Bhakti Vikas Maharaj in his biography is a little careful how he describes things. They all describe it a little differently. But this godbrother said, he answered that question, that why did the Gaudiya Mata fail? In one word, who knows? No. Adhikar ulanghana. Adhikar ulanghana. They overstepped their adhikar. They thought they were more qualified than they were. I think Rabindra Sarup Prabhu was, who wrote an article many, many years ago. It's hard to find now. Maybe they're hiding it, but he described also year after year after year so many failings in ISKCON that we have had, our scandals and our misunderstandings and our problems. And he was just remarking about the irony of the fact that despite this clear prima facie evidence of our lack of adhikar, we somehow or other we never can embrace the possibility that maybe we're just not so qualified. So this was his answer, Puri Maharaj. He said, adhikaru lankana, they overstepped their qualification. That's the importance of that verse that Krishna teaches, Uddhava, which I've already quoted from 11th canto. Swe dhikare ya nishta saguna parikirtataha. So Prabhupada warned us, and he told us, in so many ways. And in fact, Prabhupada, although he was generally pleased with his disciples, so much so that one of the final instructions he gave in 1977 was just please maintain, just cooperatively maintain whatever I've established. In 1977, we were wondering, well, why is he saying that only maintain it? Shouldn't we increase it? You have to understand the social context of ISKCON at that time. Every single year since 1974, we were doubling the book distribution in ISKCON on Prabhupada's order and by his inspiration. So when Prabhupada said at the very end that just maintain, we couldn't really appreciate the wisdom of that instruction. Of course, now, some 50 years later or so, almost, we can see very clearly it's not so easy to maintain things. There are many, many things that we have not maintained. So, anyway, this is what Prabhupada said. Generally, he was pleased with his disciples compared to what happened in Gaudiya Math. At least we're still going, and it's growing also. But we always have to be careful of this demon that is lurking within each of us, a ghost, you can say, of trying to overstep our adhikar, false ego of assuming that we know more than we do or that we're more highly advanced than we really are, because it killed the Gaudiya Math. And Prabhupada knew that. One criticism that Srila Prabhupada did have of his disciples, what is it? Who can say? Okay, the two things. For all the disciples, his criticism was that they don't read my books. And that's really the most important one, I think. For the American disciples in particular, we have our own special category. Prabhupada said, you want to change everything. Cannot maintain things. Maybe that's why he gave that instruction. I don't know. But he was always criticizing. He said, if you can stand on your hands and walk backwards, do it. But somehow or other change. Do something new. This is the thing that he criticized about the Americans in particular. Too creative. Even they have become, in the decades after Srila Prabhupada's departure, they have become theologically creative now as well. And that's not good. So we have to be very careful to do as Krishna advises Arjuna in Bhagavad-gita, chapter 4, text 15. Who can recite it? Who's reading enough that they know the verse? Purvaihi purvataram kritam. Krishna tells Arjuna, as the ancients did before you, you do that thing. Don't invent anything new. The same instruction is given in the Manusmriti, in the Bhagavatam, in so many places. So this we have to take care. And whatever instructions we have received, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakko Chitete Kori Aika, Arona Kori Homani Asha. Don't even distract thinking about anything else. Just think about the mission that Srila Prabhupada has given us. Think about the instructions he has given us which allow us to fulfill that mission. And we will receive profound, bounteous blessings of his own spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisidhanta Sarasvati Thakur. So I'll stop here. The bell has already rung. Srila Bhaktisidhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Go Premanande. Hare Krishna. Do we have time for questions? If anybody has any questions, Daiva Shakti Mataji is going to speak, so I don't want to delay that. she can undo whatever contamination you've received from me. Putam harikatamritam. Yes, Prabhuji.
That was a wonderful synopsis of the glories of Bhaktisiddhanta. Thank you so much.
All the heavy lifting was done by my elder godbrother.
Yeah. Wonderful. Could you just say briefly how Prabhupada got not just his inspiration, but the template or the plan how to spread Krishna consciousness from Bhaktisiddhanta?
Okay. Are you talking about a technical plan, or are you talking about an inspiration?
Institutional.
Very
also.
good, yeah. Srila Prabhupada is a householder. He was studying his spiritual master's books. Everybody hear me? As a householder. Householders are not, they often don't have time, right? They're busy. But as a householder, Srila Prabhupada was taking care of this. And not only his spiritual master's books, he was also studying the commentaries given by their predecessors. And so he came across Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Vyavasayatmika Buddhi verse of Bhagavad-gita. And he was struck by that commentary. Why? Who knows? Because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, even if I get nothing out of all this commitment that I'm doing, even if I don't go back to Godhead, even if I can't see any result, still I'm going to focus like a horse with blinders on the order of my spiritual master and fulfill that. And that's why whenever Srila Prabhupada got a personal instruction, especially from his own spiritual master, he took it very seriously. And what was one of those instructions? If you ever get money, books are the basis. Do not forget it. Books. And those books are not just meant to be left as it is. But you have to open the book, and you have to read it, and you have to apply it, and then you have to share it. That is the austerity of knowledge that Baladev Vidyabhushan mentions in his own commentary on chapter 4, text number 10. You can look that up. So that's in a nutshell. She's waiting, so I don't want to take too much time, but yeah. Thank you all.